Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rustic Pathways webinar on student travel benefits by age. I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Chris Stockich, and I'm the CEO of Rustic Pathways. And on tonight's topic, we're going to talk about something that has particular interest to me, which is basically looking at the benefits of traveling and how that affects high school students according to the age that they are. And the reason that I am personally so passionate about this is basically three reasons. Number one, I have three sons myself, and like all of you, I'm trying to prepare my kids for the world that they're going to enter. And as we all know, it's not an easy thing to do as you consider where we've been the last decade and probably where we're heading over the next decade, which really plays into the second thing for me, which as topics, I closely follow education, technology, climate change, artificial intelligence, and the growing global income disparity around the world. And I really believe that the combination of these forces are going to make the world a more difficult arena to work in, a difficult arena to live in, and certainly will be dramatically different than the world we know it right now. The last reason I'm so passionate about this travel is because, like a lot of other people who studied abroad, I had that typical experience in college. I actually went to an all-boys college prep high school, and then I went to Harvard University. And my junior year while at Harvard, I traveled abroad, had that international experience, and it grounded me in what I wanted to do with my time. I really found my personal passion and purpose through traveling, and I knew that I wanted to work either as a teacher and a coach, but in some type of educational format. I really was hoping that I could also work in travel, and I wanted to find a way to give back to people. And I did a lot of research and came across Rustic Pathways and have been working here since 2002 and have really helped grow the company into what it is today. And I love the work we do, and if it wasn't for that international travel experience and that study abroad experience, I would have just followed the typical path. And I know that is a very, very, very common story with any student that studies abroad. So on this call, we're going to take about 20 to 25 minutes and talk about Rustic Pathways overall, what it is we do. We're going to secondly look into student travel benefits by age, our own student learning outcomes, the things we measure, the things we see in students and the gains that they actually have. Number three, I'm just going to mention our no anxiety policy at the end, and then leave about 10 to 12 minutes for questions, which is where we could just open this all up for a discussion. So first and foremost, looking at Rustic Pathways, we are a company that is based in living at the intersection of education and travel and philanthropy. And like I said, that was a passion for me to find this intersection. And when I found it, it's just been amazing ever since. First and foremost, we are an education company. And for all of you that are looking into our open enrollment summer travel programs, we have 10 very specific student learning outcomes that we weave into all of our programs and that I'll talk about at length a little bit later in this call. Beyond our open enrollment summer travel programs, we also partner with thousands of schools around the world and customize out-of-classroom travel experiences that are with teachers, with existing curriculum, and are designed to take a group of students from a school out into the world and then re-immerse them back into the school. And we customize a curriculum to align with what that school's doing. The last thing we do is we're partnered with a nonprofit called Thrival Academies, and we're creating what will become the largest national network of charter public high schools in America. And our current belief and what we're seeing on the ground is that with a strong curriculum, with talented teachers, with a computer, with internet, that traditional classroom setting and that physical home base of a school is becoming less and less critical to the overall learning experience, and that actually getting people out into the world, into the village, living with others, provides a lot better platform for learning. Second part of what we do is the travel piece. And we've been doing this for 33 years. We are experts in travel. We have full-time operations in the 17 countries around the world where we travel. We have over 150 full-time local staff in the communities where we operate, which is one of the very special things that we have as a company. We have physical bases, we have offices, we have vehicles, we have phones. We have an in-depth and very highly acclaimed safety track record with a whole safety department for the company. So simply said, we are travelers. Traveling is what we do. We are out there in the world. We very specifically take students to remote villages in developing countries to live and work with others. The last piece that we have as a company is the philanthropic aspect of Rustic Pathways. And through the Rustic Pathways Foundation, which is our 501c3 foundation, we aim to raise millions of dollars each year for the communities where we operate. And thus far, we've built countless houses, water systems, community centers, schools. The list goes on and on and on. And as a company that firmly believes that travel is an essential part of every education, and as a company who thinks that international travel should be part of the education system here in America, we have this foundation in place to ensure that we're giving back a lot more than we take in the areas of the world where we operate. It's incredibly important for us. Not all of the Rustic Pathways Foundation projects are suitable to have students on. A lot of the work we're doing is outside what you would see as the core of our company, and you can check that out at rusticpathways.org if you're interested. So next, I want to dive into the education pieces for the open enrollment summer travel programs, which are likely what you all are looking at and interested in for this summer. So according to actually a Fast Company article I was reading this morning, and I've read many and many articles like this before, this article was saying that currently 87% of college graduates believe that they have the skills to succeed at a job. So 87% of students believe they have the skills to succeed at a job. However, only 47% of employers say that college graduates are developing the skills that they need to excel in the workplace. So there's a dramatic disparity and difference between what employers are seeing and what recent college graduates are seeing. And we believe, and what we're seeing in the conversations we're having around the world, is that most time in the classroom is still focused on developing traditional cognitive skill sets, which means students are sitting at desks, they're learning information, they're processing information, and they're recreating and putting that information out there in the world. However, most companies are looking at what makes their employees successful, and it is actually the soft skill sets and the transferable skill sets that work across companies and that work across industries. And some of these skill sets include things like communication, collaboration, teamwork, grit, humility, self-awareness, empathy, leadership, and the list goes on and on. And we believe at Rustic Pathways, and again, the conversations we're having with people are that people do believe that the next set of leaders across business, technology, healthcare, government, finance, they'll be the type of people that can investigate a variety of problems across cultures and languages, figure out new solutions to these problems or opportunities, take those into other areas of the world, and be operating on a much more of a global scale and in a way where their skill sets are transferable. So here at Rustic Pathways, we have 10 very specific student learning outcomes that we have built into our programs across the board. And these are all very specifically some of the non-cognitive skill sets that are helping prepare kids for the world. So just to go through these, as we look at empathy, we define that as our ability not just to feel someone else's pain, but rather to walk in their shoes and see the world through their eyes, and a more profound ability to switch perspectives and recognize dual viewpoints. As we look at self-awareness, this is the ability to define values, motivations, and passions, and to identify how those values are shaped, and the ability to assess one's own strengths and weaknesses and analyze where and how to improve. As we look at humility, it's an ability to understand one's place and importance and to deeply respect others and to recognize others' talents without compassion to one's own, and to possess a grounded understanding of one's limitations, and to provide service to others without question of their position in society. As we look at grit, we're looking at the intrinsic determination to persevere through challenges and setbacks without complaint and defer instant gratification in order to reach a set goal. So we look at openness to new ideas and experiences. We're looking at an eagerness and curiosity to learn from the perspective of others and the ability to incorporate one's own experiences into a lifelong quest for knowledge and growth. As we look at sense of wonderment, we're looking at the ability to be amazed and inspired by the world, and from small and seemingly mundane to the powerful and seemingly impossible to understand, recognizing beauty in the unknown while letting the world's mysteries stir throughout questions and give rise to new meanings and understandings. As we look at a belief that all people are connected by a shared humanity, we're recognizing the innate value of any human being, embracing diversity, and believing that what unites us is stronger than what divides us. As we look at a desire to positively impact the lives of others, we're looking at a drive to use one's talents as a force for good in local and global communities, and recognizing the power of a series of small actions towards a larger goal and contributing personal effort towards creating change. As we look at independence, we're looking at the ability to think and act for oneself and to take responsibility and ownership and stand behind one's beliefs and actions, to explore the world confidently and carefully, and to find support when needed. And lastly, as we look at intercultural competence, we're looking at the desire and ability to behave and communicate effectively within and across cultures and to view issues from others' perspectives. So these are the 10 student learning outcomes that we have built into our programs and the student learning outcomes that we measure and look at each year with students. So to move on to the measuring piece of all of this, the first part that we focused on was the creation of our student learning outcomes. And so we used a lot of academic literature and talked with a variety of experts to determine what skills and characteristics were tied most closely with future success and what would allow students to tackle the challenges of their generation as they're heading out into a world that will be dramatically different than we see it today. The second thing is that we started working with 2 PhD candidates who took on our student learning impact tool and spent a year figuring out what our student impact evaluation would look like so that we could measure the shifts in student learning outcomes that we hope to create. The next thing was measuring the student growth. And there's 2 specific things we do. We evaluate the quantitative data to understand what and how much students are learning, and then we use some qualitative data to assess how and why students are learning. And once we have that, we circle back on our programs and dig deeper into the how and work on the components of programs that could create greater student learning outcomes in the future. And so the 2 ways we do this: to gather the quantitative data, we survey students before and after the program, and then we do it again 6 to 9 months later to see how much of that learning has stuck, or what has at least happened 6 to 9 months after the program. Students report attitudes and probable actions according to each student learning outcome. The next thing we do is to collect qualitative data. So students report on improvements that they're perceived during focus groups, and their peers are also asked to assess those perceptions. And then in addition to that, the parents of the students and their program leaders are also interviewed to determine what growth they perceived amongst students as a result in participating in the Rustic Pathways program. And so between the quantitative and qualitative measurements and between students, program leaders, and parents, it's a fairly comprehensive student impact evaluation tool that we continue to modify. And the programs are happening. The students are part of them. And what we are focused on as an education organization is how to make it better, how to make it more powerful, how to make it more life-changing for students in the future. So as we dig into the results, what you'll see is across all of the student learning outcomes that we have, we see growth with students. And so, as I mentioned, the students are completing surveys before and immediately following their program. So if we look at the first student learning outcome here, looking at openness, they perceive how open they were to new experiences and ideas on a scale of 1 to 6. So if they put down a 1, it means they weren't open at all to new experiences or ideas. And if they look at a 6, they were open to anything at any time in any situation. And then they repeated that evaluation for each student learning outcome. The dot on this graph signifies the pre-program response, and then the arrow signifies the post-program answer, with the horizontal line illustrating the growth they experienced from 1 to 6. So as you can see, students did experience growth across all 10 student learning outcomes. What we found even more interesting was the reassessment of student learning outcomes. So as I mentioned, part of the student impact evaluation included reassessing these students to determine whether any of the growth they experienced immediately following the program continued, or if it stayed the same, or if it declined. And what we found after interviewing these students was that they demonstrated continued growth in 8 of the 10 student learning outcomes, 6 to 9 months later, compared to how they perceived themselves immediately after the programs. And that continued growth was significant, nearly matching the growth they experienced before and right after the trips. As many of you maybe know from personal experience or know from other people who have traveled, travel can be a very powerful experience in our life. And it makes people just naturally look at life in a totally different way, with a total different lens. And immersing a student, many times for the first time, in a remote community, in a developing country, where the music is different, and the language is different, and the culture is different, and the food is different, really opens up students' eyes. And it really plays into these student learning outcomes that we're trying to create. And the point of this slide, and I just want to reiterate it, is that the learning didn't stop right after the program. But instead, it was like they developed a new skill and a new lens, and the reflection around those more in-depth learning continued. And so once that learning happened, it continued 6 to 9 months later. If we look at these 3 specifically, we found that students demonstrated continued growth in 8 of those student learning outcomes. The student learning outcomes that continued months after the students completed the Rustic Pathways programs were a whole variety, but the ones with the most amount of growth were openness to new experiences and ideas, a belief that we're all connected by a shared humanity, and intercultural competence, which is the ability to communicate within and across cultures and to view and issues from other perspectives. This data is basically pointing to our students are looking at the world without bias or prejudice, and they're more accepting, generally speaking, of other people and of other cultures and of other ways of living, and they're more able to adapt to new and unfamiliar situations. These are just the outcomes that demonstrated the most growth. Students are more able to be amazed and inspired by the world. They're more self-aware. They're more independent. These were the ones that grew the most. And not only are they developing these skills and characteristics, but in many cases that growth is continuing over time, months and months and months later, after they return from the Rustic Pathways program. And so what does all this mean? You know, that it's the title and point of this webinar, and we wanted to cover it because one of the most common things we hear from people is, you know, maybe I'll wait till my daughter's a junior. I don't know if she's ready yet. You know, maybe we'll wait till my son. Your son is going to graduate high school. We'll give it to him as a high school graduation gift. Well, what we have found time and time and time again is the number one thing we hear from students is that program changed my life. The number one thing we hear from parents is, I don't know what you did over those 2 weeks, but my daughter came home more humble, more open, more honest, more appreciative. Like, thank you so much. And so for us, what this boils down to and what this means is that by investing in an immersive travel experience for your son or daughter at an early age, in their adolescence, you're not just enhancing their education in the near term, but the growth they will experience as a result will compound over time. And so I'm leaving that language up on the screen. You know, through travel, you are giving your sons and daughters the tools that they will need to succeed. Some of the critical tools that have been identified as transferable, non-cognitive skill sets that make people succeed as they get out there in the world. And on these programs, they're taken outside their comfort zones. They're required to solve unfamiliar problems. They're working in communities and giving back to families and learning about why and how these problems exist and what's going on out there. In addition, students are understanding new cultures and interacting with people that are dramatically different from themselves. These experiences are important, and I've heard from tons of parents and students over the years about how these programs have changed them. And so regardless of what professional, industry or sector people want to pursue, these programs will come into play. The last thing I'll get into is just, what allows us to do this. We are different from most student travel organizations you'll find out there in a few different ways. So first and foremost is that we are a vertically integrated travel company. We have 250 full-time staff, 100 that work here in the U.S., 150 that come from the countries and communities where we operate. And so when we want to change an element or detail of a program, we can do that in real time right now. And our staff on the ground that are delivering these programs understand exactly what we expect and the values of Rustic Pathways, and they have the ability to deliver them. We have a year-round presence in all the countries where we operate and the full-time local staff. And in addition to the other benefits, it allows us to develop long-term relationships in the communities where we operate and contribute to meaningful and long-term service initiatives. Another thing, as I mentioned, our programs are intentionally designed programs, and we weave in these student learning outcomes so that students coming off of our programs are getting more than just a touring experience and a sightseeing experience, but they're developing real life skill sets. And as you saw through the student impact tool, we're now measuring that and then using that data to figure out how to do that more and how to do it better. The third thing is that we have industry-leading health and safety standards. We employ a safety and risk management director that has more than 2 decades of experience working in the travel industry. Dave Dennis is amazing. If you ever want to talk to Dave Dennis about what makes our program safe, he will go on at length, and I highly recommend you do that if you're looking into a student travel program. We invest a lot of money into keeping people safe. We've been around for 33 years, and it's one of the things we just do excellent and win at. The last thing, or second to last thing, is looking at our program leaders. Our program leaders are not just highly trained program leaders. They are experienced program leaders, and they are program leaders that have academic backgrounds and professional experience working as teachers in experiential education, working in service learning, working in international development, and working in outdoor education fields. We're finding experts to do exactly what we need to do with the students to create the type of outcomes that we have. The last thing is that we have a pretty wide variety of programs. We've purposely created a portfolio of programs so that we have something for everybody. And we have base house programs that serve well as introduction to community service and are good for first-time travelers. We have programs that are designed for service buffs and environmentalists and athletes and future teachers and future doctors and future leaders. There is a lot of programs. Please check out the Rustic Pathways website to see what the fit is for you. Call our 1-800 number and just talk a bit about what your son or daughter is like, what they're interested in, what they're not interested in, like what type of experience you think would help them. and we can help you find the right program for you. Lastly, with Rustic Pathways, please know that your children remain safe. As I mentioned earlier in the call, I have 3 sons. Dave Dennis, our safety director, has a son and a daughter. Our children travel on Rustic Pathways programs for free throughout the summer. And so we're designing programs and taking care of programs and taking care of students and creating program experiences that we very specifically want our own children on. And so, you know, the programs are powerful, and we believe that students get a lot out of them. Last thing I'll mention on the call tonight is just that we have a no anxiety policy. Again, this is probably something you won't come around at a lot of other companies in our field, but up until the day of travel, you can cancel your program, and we can escrow 100% of the ground cost program fees for up to 2 years from the cancellation date. The whole point is, you know, again, we are parents. We understand how you can feel anxious up until the day of travel. We want to make you and your family comfortable. You know, if you decide, hey, my daughter's not ready as a sophomore, we're going to do it as a junior, that's completely fine. I'm going to pause here and see if anyone has questions. There's a questions tab within the control panel here, and you can type in some questions. Okay, this is a great question for all parents out there. Teens today are so dependent and immersed in technology. How can parents be rest assured that teens will be thoroughly